Hey everyone, it's Pittico from Daydream Nation, and I've got Harrison from Grab a Stack of Rock talking with me. We are going to chat about Iron Maiden, and the topic of this show is we need to talk. Post their recent Australia run of shows, Harrison saw the first show of the Maiden Tour in Perth, and I saw Maiden do their Sydney show, and I thought it'd be just fun to get Harrison on the show, talk about our experience with the concert, the pros and cons, and what we in general thought about the show. So I'll throw it over to you, Harrison. This is your first time seeing Maiden. Overtly a positive experience?
Yes, it was pretty much everything I hoped it would be. As we might get into a bit later, there were a few things that are sort of like standard Maiden fare that were coincidentally absent from this concert. But I wasn't missing them as much as you'd sort of expect. We might get into that a bit later.
Yeah. Well, I've seen Maiden on 5 runs, and I've got to say this is probably a little bit disappointing. I thought they were good, but they weren't great, and I'll get further into it as we go into the show. This show was very much focusing on 2 albums, Somewhere in Time, Senjutsu, and 5 songs from each. And then there was a smattering of their other albums, like Iron Maiden. They played The Prisoner off Number of the Beast, Fear of the Dark,
Play with Madness,
etc., etc. Why don't we talk about the song set? What did you think of the song set?
I thought it was great, but that is coming from someone who Somewhere in Time is in my top 5 Iron Maiden albums. So there is that. Just a sort of remark on the set list as a general, I think the closest analog we have to it is the first leg of the A Matter of Life and Death tour, where they played the whole album Matter of Life and Death, 10 songs, and then you got 5 classics. In a way, because they're supporting Senjutsu and sort of supporting Somewhere in Time retroactively, they play 5 from each. So it's like that 10, and then you get your 5 classics. Now, that leg of the tour was divisive among fans, but, one, I love Somewhere in Time, so I was absolutely chuffed to see it all over the set list. The other thing, partly as well, when I went into this, because it was my first time, I knew there was no way I was going to get like a definitive summary of the past 50 years, basically, in this one set list. So I wasn't too torn up about certain songs missing. I was like, I absolutely have to hear Caught Somewhere in Time, and I want to hear The Trooper. And that was about the extent of my wishes went, except for Senjutsu itself. Now, the other reason why I love the set list is basically they played every song I wanted to hear off Senjutsu, which was Writing on the Wall, Days of Future Past, Hell on Earth, and what was the last one?
Death of the Celts?
No, Death of the Celts was the one they played that I didn't really care. I mean, I enjoyed listening to it, but it wasn't one that I wanted to hear. What was the last one? I'm sorry, I'm blanking.
That's all right.
They played Time Machine, which I used that as my bathroom break time, and a lot of other people used that as their bathroom break time. Actually, I think it was just Days of Future Past, Hell on Earth, and Writing on the Wall. Those were the ones that I was dying to hear because they were my favorite off Senjutsu, and they played all of that. So I didn't mind that they played Death of the Celts. I enjoyed it, and that was a particularly atmospheric part of the stage. There was smoke machine everywhere. So, on a whole, I enjoyed the set list. Of the classic songs, The Trooper was the only one that I was like, I kind of want to hear that one. They didn't play Number of the Beast, they didn't play Run to the Hills, they didn't play Hallowed Be Thy Name. And
no
personally,
Aces High, no 2 Minutes to Midnight.
No, yeah. A lot of those were all over the Legacy of the Beast set list. But I personally didn't care that the Number of the Beast 3 were missing, because I think they've been clogging up set lists for way too long. It's about time that they were sort of phased out, especially as Maiden only have so many years to go. But then again, this is coming from a super fan who loves like all but 4 of their songs. So for me to, I want to hear deep cuts. But basically at the end when Always Look on the Bright Side of Life was playing, I did hear chants for beast, 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 beast sort of thing around the audience. There was a bit of that. I was surprised, actually, speaking of that, that the people around me, I guess I'm a Maiden super fan. I've watched them live on YouTube all the time, so I know they play Iron Maiden, and then they play an encore of 3 more songs. But there were some people who like got up and left after Bruce said goodnight after Iron Maiden, and
Yeah.
there were a few that were like, "Well, are they going to come out or not?" And so I was always like, surely they got to play this, and I'm like, "No, they're going to play 3 songs. Of course, it's what they do."
Did you find the crowd a bit muted? Because that's been a bit of a complaint, and it actually got some publicity on the local newswire that a lot of the crowd was kind of set at, very sedate. And just an observation with a friend of mine, Melissa Nee from Boston, and we were having a bit of having some lunch and talking about Maiden, and she said she found that the crowds were quite, not as wild as Europe and America. Did you find that the crowd in Perth was sedate? Certainly in Sydney, it was a little muted. I mean, they were enthusiastic, but it wasn't like kind of over the top. And what I related to Melissa was that it was a big cross-generational fan base. Like you had folks my age or even older bringing their kids. And I think the kids that are probably a generation younger than you, Harrison, are the ones that just sit in the seats or stand up and are maybe a bit judgy, very hard to convince. I mean, they enjoy it, but they're not sort of like wild. What was your observations of the crowds and my analogy there?
Yeah, I'm a pretty restrained person when it comes to sort of like how animated I get and that sort of thing. I did make a little bit of noise, but I didn't go crazy. Just out of curiosity, quickly, did you see night 1 or night 2 in Sydney?
Night 1, which had some issues, which I'll talk about. Yeah. But yeah.
So I obviously don't have any. This is my first concert. I can't like compare to other crowds. In that regard, I've seen a bit on YouTube. I know that South America goes absolutely nuts and will sing the riff right back to you as you're playing it. What I did notice, I think the crowd in Perth was all right. Once again, I don't have any frame of reference. I think they were pretty good. And in particular, what I noticed most was that there were barely any cell phones there. I could look out over the people standing, and there were like barely any cell phones. The people weren't into the music, from what I could tell. They were there chanting back to Bruce and all that. They were making noise. A few more cell phones did come out during like the big numbers, like Fear of the Dark, The Trooper, and Iron Maiden. But on a whole, I admit I was pleasantly surprised to see that most people were actually paying attention to the music and not looking at it through a screen. Me personally, I pulled it out for a few photos at a few sort of like spectacular moments, like a few key moments, and I did video 1 or 2 things. But on a whole, I kept off my cell phone as well, and I was pleased to see that the rest of the crowd seemed to be doing that as well.
Do you think did Bruce have a lot of stage patter? Because this time round, he had a lot more stage patter with the audience than previous. And I'm just thinking, was he trying to work extra hard, especially in the Sydney room, because he felt like they may be not quite as enthused. They weren't at that 100% level comparative to previous tours. Did he do a lot of stage patter in Perth?
Once again, don't have a huge frame of reference for this, but I think he was relatively quiet in terms like there were 3 moments where he sort of talked to the stage. About 3 or 4 songs in, he did his formal, sort of welcome to the show sort of thing, and he had a brief chat about how they'd been in Perth rehearsing and sort of gone to Rottnest, and he mentioned Quackers, which was like a running theme throughout. Then he told a bit of a story right before Can I Play With Madness, and then there was 1 or 2 more short things, but he wasn't exactly there talking our ear off. I think that was fine. I honestly expected a bit more talking, but at the same time, I'm here for the music, not to hear, a yarn.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of stage patter, and it was getting to the point I thought that maybe we could have potentially stolen 1 or 2 songs. But when you look at the song set from Iron Maiden, it's a very well-oiled machine, and there's not a lot of room to add songs or do deep cuts on the spur of the moment. They're not like Deep Purple. It's not like a jam band, because everything is connected with the stage set, the lighting, the smoke bombs. It's like turning the Titanic. They can't really change the setup without a lot of mechanics behind the scenes operationally.
One of my long-time criticisms of Maiden has been that rigidity of the set list. There's no surprise, and they really didn't do that much. They don't really go that deep into their catalogue. I'm going to go back to the set list a bit here, but Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great is the only time in their history that I can remember, apart from, say, very early Diano years that we have no record of, but it's the only time in their history that I know of that they've debuted a song live, not on its album tour. Now, obviously, Maiden play a shit ton of songs from the album on their album tour. They're to be commended for that. But once the album's gone, it's basically forget about it, basically. You know, when was the last time we heard something from Dance of Death? You know, when was the last time we heard something from Brave New World that wasn't Blood Brothers? I mean, other than Wildest Dreams, which they premiered before the Dance of Death tour, Alexander the Great is the first time they've actually gone back to something and said, what can we bring that's new to the table? And before the Legacy of the Beast tour, before this tour itself, I would have said that Maiden's rigid, inflexible, predictable set list was my greatest criticism of them. But the last few tours have sort of brought out a bit more that I've been happy with. Also, to talk on the set list, just briefly again, Maiden usually used to change up the set list slightly for the second leg of their tours, and I'm thankful that they didn't this time because I wanted to see what they played in 2023, which they carried over.
Yeah. I think a few folk had issues with the song list, and I think that was a common complaint with maybe the more casual fan than us, that they didn't play the hits or they didn't play the albums that were the commercial hits in Australia. I mean, Number of the Beast, not playing any songs off that is quite ballsy.
Yeah, for sure.
Your Power Slave, not playing the 1-2 punch of Aces High or 2 Minutes to Midnight. I'm looking at the song list, and I think there were too many epics. And, you know, I'm looking at the song list. Number 7 was Death of the Celts. And then number 10 in the song list is Alexander the Great. So I'm not sure. It got a little bit saggy in the middle. There are a lot of epics. I went with the flow, but I think they should have put some more of the 4 to 5 minute, more punchy songs and less of the epics. I don't know what your views on that are.
I personally found, maybe I was just enjoying myself too much, but I found that the concert went by rather quickly. I mean, it was only a 15-song set, but it did have, as you mentioned, a fair few epics. And I didn't really find that I was there looking at my watch sort of thing. I was sort of enjoying the music, but that might have just been, I've first time concert experience sort of thing. And I'm, a huge fan of Iron Maiden. And I don't think it's unreasonable to be unhappy with the set list, especially because we didn't get the Legacy of the Beast tour. So we missed like Aces High, 2 Minutes to Midnight. We missed all of that. So the last time we saw them was the Book of Souls 2016. Which, we haven't seen Number of the Beast heard Number of the Beast since Book of Souls, almost 10 years. So
That's
much
true.
as I really enjoyed the set list, I was hoping that they might throw a little extra bone to us because they missed us last time. And I do think it's reasonable to be dissatisfied to an extent with the set list. I mean, you knew what you were getting into, basically, when you bought tickets for this show. But at the same time, I understand where they're coming from. I'm a super fan, but I understand, sometimes you want to hear Beast and Hallowed and Run to the Hills.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I said, the Book of Souls, I really enjoyed that tour, and I enjoyed the set list, and I thought it was nicely paced, but I just thought there were just maybe one too many epics in the show, and they could have done a few of the shorter songs. The big sticking points for me was that there were some issues sonically and rhythmically, especially with Nico's playing. There was, he wasn't doing as many fills. We know he's had a stroke, and he was on to get behind the kit is a miracle, and he's done a lot of rehab, but he is definitely not the same drummer, and there is a deterioration. And I suspect a lot of the songs that have been dropped is simply he can't play it. So
I think that's a
you,
reasonable assumption, yeah. And I mean,
yeah,
Bruce's voice probably fits in there a bit as well.
absolutely. So there was a lot of fills that he missed. There was like the first song they played was called Somewhere in Time, and it was a bit of a mess. And I'm thinking, whoa, what's happening here? And it sounded like Bruce was ahead of the beat and he was behind the beat. And I don't know if there was a problem with the monitor, you know, what he was hearing. And it seemed all the guitar lines were just, you know, out of sync. There was definitely some rhythm problems. The next song, Stranger in a Strange Land, slightly improved. The writing on the wall was okay. But to me, it was the fourth song, Days of Future Past. It was like, okay, they've got into gear, and that sounds like the Maiden that I'm familiar with. So really, in a concert where there is, you know, 15 songs, it took for me personally to fourth song before they started to hit the gears. And you know, I think it's noticeable. I think it might have been Nico and the bottom end.
Yeah, I do remember seeing a headline, that came across my feed that said something along the lines of, Nico doesn't play the fills that he can't do. It's not like he, attempts them and messes them up. He just knows I can't do that. I'm not doing that sort of thing. So I think that's a very deliberate thing that's a bit planned out. I mean, I'm coming at that. I never saw Iron Maiden before this, so I'm like, I'd rather hear them like this than not at all, sort of thing. The experience. And unfortunately for this conversation, I'm not like Pete Jones. I'm a very superficial listener. Drums barely register to me. If my ears hear noises that they like, I'm happy, sort of thing. So I was just rocking out. I wasn't really paying attention to tempo or what's in time, what's not, or what's in tune, sort of thing. So I
Yeah.
can't really comment, unfortunately, with any accuracy on that. Just that I
Yeah.
enjoyed the show.
As a first time concert goer to Maiden, how did you find the dynamics of the three guitarists? Did you think it was a little bit cluttered, or they were perfectly in synergy? It nicely weaved between the three of them.
When I've been watching their concerts, I've found that there's a clear difference between, say, for example, the Trooper with three guitars and two guitars. Two guitars is maybe it's just the production as well, but three guitars, it just seems like there's a bit of sonic mess that comes with three guitars. They won't all be like exactly lined up with each other. There's just a
It's a
little
little bit
bit
on the
of,
fringe, a little bit
yeah,
buzzy. Yeah.
there's a little bit of this extra noise going on in the background.
Yes.
That's what I notice on their live stuff. You compare On Vivo, the Trooper, to Live After Death, the Trooper. There's a clear difference there. I was listening with like noise reducing earphones in, and I didn't have an issue with the sound. I could hear Bruce clearly, and that's that's my first priority is, can I hear the singer clearly? Because there are so many live DVDs where I'm like putting the volume up and like the music itself is a bit too loud, but I can't hear the singer if it's sort of thing. So I was happy that I could hear Bruce well enough. And truth, I can't really remember that. The three guitars, I can't. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. I unfortunately can't remember whether I had any opinions either way. All I can say is that it wasn't egregiously sort of out of sync.
Oh, look who's here. It's Melissa Nee from Boston. Hello, Melissa. So
Hello.
we caught up with each other in Sydney. It was wonderful to see you. And Melissa actually went to 4 concerts, correct me if I'm wrong, 2 in Melbourne, 2 in Sydney, to Iron Maiden. And I've just been having a chin wag with Harrison, who saw Maiden for the first time in Perth. We were just talking about Harrison's overtly positive. I'm sort of a bit more mixed. We were just chatting about the song list and how I think it's probably had too many epics for my liking, and I'll talk to you in a moment about that. And the last point we were just talking about was, for me, it took a while because I was on the Thursday concert and you went on the Thursday, Friday, and it was a lot better on a Friday, apparently. It took a lot longer to get into the first gear for me. That first song, Caught Somewhere in Time, was a bit of a mess. And to me, it was very noticeable with Nico and his drumming. there appears to be a deterioration. What did you think of that? Nico and the way the band were performing across the board for the 4 concerts.
That show was, of the 4, I think that was the toughest show. I thought they sounded better in Melbourne, and they definitely seemed to be better the second night. Even the first songs, but yeah, that first song, you could tell that it seemed like maybe they weren't all on the same page a little bit.
Yeah.
And it just took them a little bit to write. I mean, they did write the ship, but it took them a little bit of sort of time to write the ship. I thought they did better on Friday.
Yeah, well, I was just telling Harrison, I think that it took him to Days of Future Past as I thought, okay, this sounds like Maiden. They're clicking into gear. It took them a long time, but that first song was a bit of a mess. And I was just in the seat and I'm just going, ooh, this doesn't sound right, because Bruce was ahead of the beat. He was behind the beat. And I'm just wondering whether the monitor mix was all out of whack, but it just seemed like it was all over the shop. And somebody has released the full show on YouTube, and I watched it back. And a lot of my friends in the UK have been commenting on social media and going, ouch, that's awful. But you can't really judge a YouTube show from a certain angle. You've got to be there. But yeah, it does look like those first couple of songs were pretty shaky. You were right up the front. Did you notice that? Was it as noticeable in your position right up near the stage?
Yeah, on Thursday night, I was pretty close to the stage, and you could tell I would say definitely the first song, really, they seemed to be a little bit out of whack, but then they seemed to straighten it out. And the second night, I was over by the soundboard, and for me, it really always sounds better by the soundboard, and I thought it sounded a lot better.
Yeah. So, Harrison, first song for you, you were just excited to see them for the first time, and it just went smooth as?
Yeah, I mean, I love Caught Somewhere in Time, so I was just chuffed that they hadn't dropped it from the set, sort of thing. Caught Somewhere in Time has always been the sort of song that's a bit shaky, sort of like charges forward, but not all the screws on the train are properly tightened, sort of thing. I think it might just have to do with the way the riff is, sort of thing. It's fast and that sort of thing, but I guess, maybe, do you think that maybe sort of familiarity with the venue might have a little bit to do with it? Like, because I've heard you said that, night 2 was sort of better of the two. And in Perth in particular, they'd been there for like 2 weeks or something rehearsing and that thing. So I imagine they would have had ample time to sound check the venue, sort of thing. Do you think it's possible that there's an element of, familiarity with the venue that might explain why I, at least to my ears, got a better start to the show?
Perhaps. I had somebody who was saying no matter any concert they go to Kudos Arena in Sydney, it sounds terrible. I don't agree with that. I've seen some fantastic concerts there and the sound has been absolutely top notch, but there was some problem about Maiden. And you think with Killswitch, I didn't see Killswitch, Melissa. I don't know what the sound like was with them, but you would think with the support band that somebody's twiddling the knobs and just refining it and making sure that first song is just spot on. But it wasn't meant to be. Also, another point that I was bringing up with Harrison is about this ongoing debate about the 3 guitarists, and is it better for the band or is it a bit over top? And Harrison was saying something quite interesting, and I tend to agree. Some of the songs like The Trooper, which were recorded for 2, it seems a little bit overbaked when there's 3, and it kind of doesn't line up. What do you think, Melissa? Because you've seen this lineup. Melissa's seen Iron Maiden probably 50 times. Is that a good... I've just picked this figure.
Yeah, 57.
57, close. Do you agree that some of the older twin guitar attack songs don't quite sound as good when it's 3? It's a bit overbaked.
I mean, they definitely have to rework it, right? Because they have to give him something to do other than dance around. And he is a good guitarist in his own right. And I think that they have to kind of splice it. And so it's definitely different. I mean, it's do they need it? Obviously, they don't need three guitars for Trooper because it wasn't written that way, and for the most part, it wasn't performed that way, and so it's definitely kind of just finding something for Yannick to do in that song that he doesn't really need to be there. You know what I mean? It's not like a song that he wrote that was written with three guitarists in mind. It's a song that they don't really need three guitarists, but they still have to find something for him to do. And so
you take a song like Revelations, on the other hand, and when they played that on Live After Death, they couldn't do all the guitar parts that you'd heard in the studio. But then come, Flight 666,
Exactly.
and then suddenly, everything is healed. Like, the only disappointment I have with Live After Death is you don't hear all of the guitar that went on in Revelations.
Right.
There's one point where it's all rhythm, no lead.
Well, I have
Sorry.
problems with the album, but that's another show. But yeah, so I think, the stuff the pre-Yannick stuff, that's what's going to happen. They're going to have to sit down and try to rework it in order to give him a part in that song.
Yeah.
It's not needed because they were doing the song with two guitarists just fine.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I'm bringing it up because I think those first couple of songs it was a bit messy, and what I'm about to say is a bit controversial, but I'm thinking maybe they just need to play it like a sporting match, and they rotate the guitars. So what happens is it's just two, and one goes off onto the sits on the bench. You just do the rotation of three. Whoever works best for the song. I know it's never going to happen, but I think I'll put it out there. Would it be best for the band live, from a live perspective, clean guitar lines? Because I think some of the songs, it's a little bit sonically, it's a bit of a bleed, bit blurry.
A little bit too much.
Yeah, but then you sort of have to play 2 nights in every city because, Maiden are absolutely dedicated to every place gets the exact same show. Nobody misses out. So, there might be someone who's like, I wanted to see Dave sort of thing, So you'd have to play 2 nights at every show in a fictional world where they did that.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it's just rotational. At the end of the day, they all get equal billing, but it just means that it's not a triple axe attack on every single song. It means that there are two, and it's for the benefit of the band. One sits it out, and then the next one comes on. It's sort of rotational. What works best for the song?
Oh, you mean? I get what you mean. I get what you mean now. Not having benched for the whole concert.
No. Sorry,
I misinterpreted that. Like, Dave a night off sort of thing.
It's just a rotational.
Sorry.
He's sitting in the wings. Okay, this is Adrian's song, so it's Adrian.
It's time
Dave.
for Bring Your Daughter to the Floor to get Yannick on, sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Melissa, do you think that would work? I mean, you say it wouldn't happen, but for the benefit from a live perspective?
But from a live perspective, I don't know. I know that it's sometimes messy, but I do like the fact that they kept Yannick and and he's very much a part of the band, and that they don't make it like, he's second fiddle or he's anything like that. And I don't know that Dave or Adrian is going to give up, a part of their spotlight, a part of their guitar solos to, say, okay, well, Yannick, you just do this and I'll go to get a glass of water or something. Like, I don't.
Actually, with Revelations, for like the longest time in the reunion era, the first solo, which was Adrian's on the record, if I'm remembering this correctly, it was done by Yannick live, and it wasn't until the Legacy of the Beast tour that Adrian began to play his own solo again on Revelations, which just an interesting thing regarding those three guitars. And then on the Legacy of the Beast tour, they did this thing where one night Yannick would play it and then one night Adrian would play it, and they'd alternate that.
And that's what Pete's talking about. So yeah,
Okay, well, what were the high points for you, Melissa? What was the highlight songs or performances for you? Let's talk about some of the positives.
It seems to me, well, first of all, I'm a massive fan of Stranger in a Strange Land, so I absolutely love that song. I absolutely love that song live. So that was a highlight for me. But I would tell you that everybody was talking about Hell on Earth, how fantastic it was. And some people were, a little bit concerned about the longer songs or whatever. And everybody was just raving, both in Melbourne and in Sydney were raving about that and thought that that was the highlight of the show. And that was pretty amazing. I thought that came off really, really well. I think that, I don't know, do they need all those long songs? I'd probably tweak the set list a little bit, but I thought Hell on Earth definitely worked.
Yeah. Harrison, Hell on Earth, agree with that one?
One of the three songs that I was dying to hear off Senjutsu. It's my favorite of the final three long bombers on Senjutsu. So, yeah, I was thrilled to hear. I love that song. And sort of, just to touch on Death of the Kept, another long one, even though it wasn't one that I cared for, I found that the atmosphere, particularly the smoke machines and the lighting, made it enjoyable. And I did, rock out to the music while it was playing, as opposed to, say, the Time Machine, which was my much needed bathroom break.
Yeah,
a lot of people seem to agree with me on
surprised.
that. I saw a lot of people in the bathroom during Time Machine.
I was pleasantly surprised with Death of the Codes because it wasn't my favorite off Senjutsu. And I was thinking maybe that would be my bathroom break, although I don't take a bathroom break, but that would be kind of that song. But no, I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought that I was going to enjoy it. But yeah, Time Machine was probably my least favorite as well.
Yeah. For me, I love Alexander the Great, and that's been the number one fan
Yeah.
requested song. And I thought the only way I'd ever hear that was seeing the cover band, the Iron Maidens. But they finally pulled it out and they listened to the fans, and it was good. So before the encore, you had Alexander the Great, Fear of the Dark, Iron Maiden, Killer, Killer, Killer. And I thought that was a nice little punchy before the, sort of the break, and then they come back for the three songs at the end. Isn't it interesting? Wasted Years is now turned into a bit of their signature song.
Yes.
It's part of their song set, which is kind of rusted on, isn't it? You would think Run to the Hills and 2 Minutes to Midnight, etc., would be rusted on, but it's Wasted Years. And they played a really rambunctious, robust version of it. It was really a good finish to the
all throughout
show.
their history. Wasted Years was like the song from Somewhere in Time that you'd be pretty guaranteed you'd hear. Obviously not during the Blaze era, but they played it all through the Fear of the Dark era. Most of the songs from that album dropped completely out of the set list. Just Heaven Can Wait and Wasted Years were really the only thing with a very brief appearance from Stranger in a Strange Land. But yeah, Wasted Years has been the enduring classic from that album.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
a lot of people's favorite on that album. It's catchy. It's sort of, Adrian is very good at making sort of a quote unquote poppy type
Yes.
of song. I was also pleasantly surprised with Heaven Can Wait because that's not one of my favorite songs either, but it goes really well live.
I'll admit I was a bit disappointed that they didn't bring out, all the community people to do their chanting during the wall part.
Yes.
But Bruce did have a gunfight with Eddie, which I thought was enough to make up for it.
Well, it's a spectacular show. The lighting, the stage set. It's.
Do you want to talk about the stage set? Because I'll admit I expected a bit more extravagance. I thought it was a bit bare bones and minimalistic.
Do you think it's economics? Melissa, are we missing out on anything comparative to what you've seen overseas?
No, I saw the same show in Europe last year, and it was the same. It was the same the same set.
I meant overall from like a whole design thing, because if you look back at, say, the Book of Souls, they had this like double tiered with towers. Legacy of the Beast, that was everything. The Spitfire, Icarus, the Cathedral. On Vivo had this whole space station thing. They went for very minimalist. There wasn't really much going on the upper level. Now, we did for the first time in their history, as far as I can remember, during Iron Maiden, get a backstage Eddie and a walk-on Eddie at the same time.
Yeah.
But I'll admit, the one sort of disappointment I had was the stage set was quite, barren, for lack of another term. It wasn't as involved and, I guess you'd say like 1980s. Dio would have his whole dragon sort of thing. I expected a little more, basically.
Well, did you notice that? What I did notice is that there wasn't Bruce's costume changes.
Oh
Like
yeah, he
some of
didn't
his
wear the red
props.
things for the trooper.
He didn't have his Union Jack. He wasn't waving his Union Jack, which I thought was interesting. He didn't have his lantern.
Oh yeah,
He,
I was disappointed when they did Fear of the Dark and he didn't have his whole top hat lantern
yeah,
deal.
he didn't have his whole little outfit and his little lantern or whatever. It was a little bit, that was a little bit weird. I was kind of surprised that he didn't have a he didn't have his props. He didn't have his jacket. He didn't have some of that stuff. I don't know why. Maybe they forgot him. I don't
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
It's weird how Maiden let a lot of their previous stage stuff just sit in a warehouse, basically. They rarely revisit things like, the Spitfire, that was one song on one tour. Now it's just gone, sort of thing.
Yeah. Nico, where he plays the drums in that cubby hole, I've got a bit of an issue with that. It'd be nice if he was on a riser. Do you folk know why? Is it like a sound perspective that they put him in this cubby hole? Because if you're in a position in that auditorium, you may not see Nico if you're on an angle.
I mean, even if there's a riser, you might not see him just because of his massive drum and cymbal setup.
Yeah, but a better chance than seeing him where he's
true.
like tucked away behind the
Yeah, he is
behind the
definitely
scenes.
tucked away. Maybe he likes it that way. I don't know. Maybe he likes it that way, but he's never really been, he's always been in that sort of that spot.
In the cubby hole type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only time he's sort of been elevated was the original Somewhere in Time tour where the head would inflate. But other than that, I don't know. I think it's just a thing that drummers are in the back there doing their thing.
Absolutely. I thought Bruce was in fine form. I think out of the 5 tours that I've seen Maiden, this is probably his best. Because the last time I saw the Book of Souls, he just recovered from cancer, and you could see that there was still some effects, but he was in fine throttled form. Melissa, would you agree? Bruce was on the money?
I mean, he sounded great. He wasn't as he didn't run around as much. He seemed a little bit less running around, but he still got around. He was still, he got up on the riser and he was, kind of he still was animated and he sounded great. He sounded absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of the first things I noticed as soon as he started singing. I mean, Caught Somewhere in Time isn't the most strenuous song, but I was like, yeah, he sounds good. And after the show, I went back and I rewatched some of the 2023 dates, and particularly the closing date in Wacken 2023. And there was a noticeable difference. He sounded a lot worse for wear. I know it's the end of the tour, Perks of seeing an early date, he sounds stronger. Now, just a sort of coincidental absence by the way I noticed by the way the set list fell. Bruce didn't actually scream like once. He's like Banshee, Air Raid Siren scream like you get in Number of the Beast. Just the way the songs that they played, he didn't have any of those. And another thing I noticed, how they've got their classic, Revelations, Power Slave, Rime of the Ancient Mariner. During the solo, there's that breakdown for that guitar harmony. There weren't any of those dedicated guitar harmony parts. Now, I don't think this was a deliberate thing to exclude it. It was just an interesting thing. The way the set list fell, I found that there were certain things that you'd expect, that are sort of quintessential Iron Maiden that sort of just ended up sort of not featuring, just by the way the songs were chosen.
Yeah, I think, listen, they're getting older. I think they have to be strategic, right? They have to kind of think about Bruce's voice. They have to think about a lot more than they did even 20 years ago, about song placements and how it's going to affect his voice, how it's going to affect the other people in the band. Obviously now A lot of consideration has to be taken into Nico, and they've got already announced a tour for next year, and it'll be interesting to see what that set list looks like, because a lot of those early songs that they're hinting that they're going to play, or they're intimating that they're going to play, is kind of like might not be so easy for Nico, and that's a concern. But I think that they tried to craft this this stage show this time around that sort of that was geared towards people who aren't 25 anymore.
Yeah, you're right. And Harrison and I were talking about our different experiences with the crowd. And I found the crowd polite, enthusiastic, but not over the top. And Mel, you and we've had some conversations, because you were saying about the Aussie crowds comparative to the Europe, or Harrison was saying about South America, where they just go over the top. And I've got a theory that it's a lot of cross-generational fans, and maybe they gravitate more to the early material, had issue with some of the more, the longer epic songs, which are, take their time to reveal itself.
I'm not sure I can see the sorry to interrupt. I'm not sure I can see the logic behind that, because some of these younger fans might have got their first album, or their second or third album might have been A Matter of Life and Death, or Brave New World, or that sort of thing. I know for me, The Book of Salt is one of my favorite albums of all time. So I'm not sure how much cross-generationality affects. Sorry to shoot you down like this, but I don't know how much it affects how much they enjoy the songs. I've personally found that it's the older fans that are more stuck in their ways in my time on social media.
Yeah.
I would believe that. But I also I thought that the newer songs went over better in Europe last year than Australia. And listen, I absolutely loved my time in Australia, and I loved the shows in Australia, and I have Australian friends, and so this is nothing against Australians, but I did think that that everybody was a little bit more chill. The first night that I saw them in Melbourne, I thought that I was on the floor and I was with my friends or whatever, and everybody around us seemed to be dancing and jumping around and seemed a little bit more enthusiastic. The second night I was first at the barrier, so obviously everybody is, on 10. And then when I went to Sydney, my friend Mark and I were up front. And so we were only like maybe 4 people deep. So we were right there, and we were in the thick of it, and people were bopping around, but they weren't as, I don't know. I've been to other shows where if you're that close to the stage, it can get kind of hairy. I mean, it was nice that nobody was pushing and shoving, but it wasn't like crazy. And then the last night that I saw them, where I was standing by the soundboard, I was the only person going nuts. Everybody was just kind of like standing around. A couple people were bopping their heads a little bit, but excuse me, they got a little bit excited for some of the older songs, but yeah, they were pretty chill. I was kind of like, and of course I'm a crazy person.
Yeah.
But
I think it all comes down to the set list, to be honest. So I just think that if there was more of those older songs, I think there would have been recognition, and it may have sort of ramped things up. But look, I was at the Thursday show. I thought it was pretty enthusiastic. They enjoyed it. But definitely, you could tell as soon as the Trooper went on, it was like, whoa, there was this recognition, and albeit was near the end of the show. So
yeah, I mean that one wasted, and from where I was, Prisoner went over really, really well. That people were kind of a little bit more excited about that,
Yeah, absolutely. So, Harrison, what would you have done with the set list? We were talking offline briefly about your dream set list. What songs would you have injected into your dream set list if Maiden played Australia?
So the first caveat is because it was my first time, I know that I'm not going to get the definitive Iron Maiden experience of 50 years in one set list. The other caveat is because they played everything I wanted to hear off Senjutsu, and because I'm in love with Somewhere in Time, I didn't have any issues with the set list per se. And the third thing is that I'm a crazy person who loves like No Prayer for the Dying in the Blaze era, so you get some really weird picks from me. I was like really hoping they'd have snuck in a No Prayer for the Dying song in there, and this is getting ahead, but I'm excited for the fact that we might get some No Prayer for the Dying in the next set. But if I was just going to do some quick switcheroos to the set list, take out Time Machine, although I did need my bathroom break, so. But yeah, take out Time Machine. Going in, I would have said take out Death of the Celts, but I enjoyed my experience during Death of the Celts. I'll leave it in there, and I'll just say, all right, 2 songs to replace Time Machine. I'm going to try and be realistic here. I know they won't play Purgatory off Killers, sort of thing. I'd love to hear an instrumental, but I know they're not going to do that either. Damn, let me think. What would I like to hear? Well, they did Blaze on the easy thing is like Sign of the Cross, switch Time Machine to Sign of the Cross, throw us a Blaze Bone. That I would have liked as well.
Nice. What about you, Mel? What would you?
Yeah,
like
I
to
would have
put in?
taken out Time Machine, and I'm kind of okay with No Heaven Can Wait. I mean, I liked it, but I don't love it. I would swap Heaven Can Wait for Sea of Madness.
Sea of Madness is a hard one to do, I think,
I know,
with all
but I really
those
like
vocal
it.
harmonies on the record. I know it's a
But I
great
really
song,
like it,
but
man.
like doing it live is like,
I know, but it's sort of
I
a
don't mean to shoot you
ridiculous
down. I
one, I
just mean
guess.
to sort of address that little elephant in the room.
I know they're not going to play it. I'm just saying that, if they're going to swap it out. You know, nobody, not nobody, but a lot of people don't want to hear Darkest Hour, but I would have really kind of liked to hear it just because I really like that song. But it probably would have been a bathroom break for a lot of people because it's kind of slow and chill and prodding and not really, um, you know, doesn't really get your juices flowing. Um, you know, I I have no problem with them doing things that ramp up the crowd, like the Fear of the Dark or Aces High or Run to the Hills or Trooper or anything like that. For me personally, my favorite song is Revelations. So anytime they want to play Revelations, I'm not going to say no.
Well, I think that I can only go on the basis of the Thursday show, and it was slow to get into first gear. It took the 4th song. I would strengthen it and put Aces High and 2 Minutes to Midnight, because that's my favorite opening 2 tracks on any metal album. It's the brilliant 1-2 punch. I think that would be the perfect way to start the concert, and that would rev it up. And once the crowd's revved up, then you can take them on a journey and sprinkle some new songs and experiment with it. I think the song listing could have been strengthened in respect of how it ran, and I agree. I'm probably repeating myself. I think there was just one too many epic songs, and they were of the 6 to 7 minutes. Mel, do you think that there was too much stage patter? I've already asked Harrison this.
Yeah, and the thing that's weird about Bruce chit-chatting with us is that he's got to know that people go to multiple shows, so it's the same shtick. It's like, work on your material.
Sorry.
Although I
I will
will
just
say,
address that quickly. Sorry, I hate to interrupt, but when I watched the Wacken 2023 show, he did the same Agnes speech, the same,
so I was just
and
gonna,
I play with Agnes before
so I
that
was
as
gonna,
well.
I was, that's what I was getting to. So if
Sorry.
I could just finish. So last year I saw the show in Glasgow, Manchester, and Dublin, and it was literally the same rap. So like, okay, you did the same rap last year, 3 shows. So I was a little bit surprised when I saw the show in Canada last October, and it was the same rap. And I was like, really? He can't come up with any new material? And so it was kind of the same thing in Australia. I said to my friend, I said, I can't believe he's like got the same jokes. I mean, he's had all this time to work on his material. He was a little bit different on Friday. He said a few different things, or he worded things a little bit differently, but it was the same thing. And obviously he repeated the whole thing about Agnes. But he did say on Friday something to the effect of, you've heard about Agnes, or something to that, kind of implying the fact that he realizes that, a lot of us have already seen this, even the people who are in Australia, and this is their first time seeing this tour, have gone to multiple shows and therefore have seen the same sort of shtick. So maybe he works on his material.
I don't think he's guilty of, anything that a lot of other rock and roll stars do. Paul McCartney does the same stage patter. And I've heard, he was, when I saw Paul McCartney, he does a 3-hour show, and he was telling all these interesting stories. And then I read the review in the Melbourne show, and it quoted exactly the same stories. So I think they've just got this script. They stick to it. It's a lot easier. And, it is what it is.
Yeah, in this day and age, if you mispronounce a word and it sounds like a bad word, you'll get cancelled. So... you got to play it by the numbers sometimes.
Absolutely. And, Maiden's like a well-oiled machine. And as I was said to Harrison earlier in the show, Mel, they can't really pull a song, off the out of the blue. They've got to stick to the same songs every night, because it's all connected to smoke bombs and
it's all synchronized. It's like a play. It's all synchronized. It's all connected. Yeah, and that's why it's great to go. You and I went to see British Lion. I went and saw Bruce last year in Glasgow, and so it's nice to sort of see them in a more free-form, laid-back atmosphere.
Absolutely. We need to briefly talk about that. Indeed, Melissa and I saw British Lion playing a pub gig in Australia, in Sydney. Wasn't very well attended. It was about 200 or 300 punters, but it was great. And just to be that close to Steve Harris and hear that bubbling, popping bass of his, and he was just so into it. He was happy to be there, and the band rocked. They were really, really good.
They're a really good band, yes.
I think it's an amazing idea for when, the band comes here for their solo projects to also have a little outing, because when else are we going to get to see British Lion down here? I think it's a great idea. I could have gone, but I sort of wanted to, as I said, my first concert, I wanted it to be Iron Maiden.
So. Absolutely. What was Bruce Dickinson like solo, Melissa, live?
He was amazing. His voice was, I only saw one show last year in Glasgow. He was all over the stage. He was definitely having a great time. His voice sounded amazing. And you just felt like it was more laid back. And if you go back and you look at the various shows that he's done, he's popped a song in, taken a song out. He's kind of worked. So you kind of you weren't 100% sure what you were going to get that night, which was great. So you were kind of like, oh, wow, he's doing the Tower. He's doing Jerusalem, or he's doing whatever. And yeah, and his band is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So I hope that he's going to bring it to North America and hopefully Australia as well, so you guys can see it.
Yeah, great. So what is the future like for Iron Maiden? Another tour in Australia?
Yeah, they just announced one. I already got my tickets for Stockholm and Dublin.
Nice.
That's why I was late. I tried to get Manchester. I don't know what's going on with Manchester. I got a little bit of an issue with the pre-sale. It kept trying to sell me VIP tickets, and then it was telling me there was no more floor seats for Manchester. So I have to sort of figure that out. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird that they went ahead and they announced this tour for next year when they haven't even finished this. I was joking around with people saying how I haven't even finished paying off this tour yet, and now it's already another tour.
Yeah. To be fair, it's a 50th anniversary tour. It has to line up with the 50th anniversary.
I know,
sort of thing.
I know,
so,
but it's just like, it's like Geez, guys, I mean, because they're coming to the US in a few, they'll be here in November. So, and then, Bruce had said that he was going to be in 2025, he was going to be doing some solo stuff in North America. So I don't know what that's going to look like. Maybe before the summer run, maybe after the summer run. Be interesting to sort of see how he sort of squeezes that whole thing in, because it is more difficult for him to latch on to an Iron Maiden tour than Steve is, because of his voice. He wouldn't be able to do 7 nights in a row.
Yeah, well, it looks like there's some big plans for Iron Maiden next year. And do you think they're going to record another album anytime soon?
I remember seeing a headline just recently of Steve saying there aren't any plans for new material at the moment. So, I mean, I think that lines up with the fact they got to finish this tour. They got to go the 50 years tour. After that, I think it's really 50-50. Like, I wouldn't have been surprised if after they finished this tour, they called it. I know that they're not the type to call it quits on tour, but just being realistic, I wouldn't have been surprised if this was their last tour. And personally, if I had to bet money on it, I'd say that the 50 years is probably their last world tour, just judging by their age.
I would say as well. And at least at the very least, definitely Nick goes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And they've got to sort of wait and sort of see. I think they got to wait and see, what next year looks like for him as well.
Oh, well, wonderful to talk to both of you. Harrison from Grab a Stack of Rock saw the Perth concert and the first Iron Maiden concert. You can see him on Grab a Stack of Rock with Mike Ladano and Melissa Nee. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Well.
Got a metal podcast. I'd love to do some more shows next year when you go to Stockholm and Dublin. Maybe you can be the Rock Daydream Nation correspondent, microphone in hand.
Got it.
And some local travelogue type experiences, because I think Maiden fans worldwide, it's a huge community, and there's a lot of sort of a bond, isn't there, with
Absolutely.
Maiden fans. That is something really special. And it's cross-generational, and it's cross-continent. So I think you met quite a few other people from different countries in Australia, just traveling and following the Maiden van, didn't you?
I did. I met a lot of people that, like yourself, that I had interacted with, whether it's on, Twitter or YouTube or had been on my show or whatever. And so it was great to meet these people in person and get to know them in person. My friend Andrew met his wife and his son. His son had his 12th birthday at a Maiden show. I mean, what a way to celebrate your birthday. He got a wristband from Dave. He got pics. My friend's 17-year-old daughter got some Dave pics. So it was great. It was great to see some of my friends from the US who I know and I've gone to other shows with. So it was awesome. It's just always such a great time. I mean, it's not just about the show. It's about the whole experience, about me always wanting to go to Australia and to see the beautiful country and to meet everybody and to do my favorite band. So it's just a whole entire package.
Yeah. Well, I hope we get another tour, but it's purely selfish. You just sometimes you just don't. Yeah.
If they do come here in 2026, it'll be the shortest gap between Australia appearances ever. So bring it on, I say.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, Harrison, Melissa, pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm sure we'll do another show soon on Rock Daydream Nation. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Tell us what you think about the Iron Maiden concerts. If you saw it recently, share your experiences. Tell us what your perfect song list is. We love reading your comments, but one thing's for sure, you'll see these folks on YouTube very soon. Cheers and have a good night.